He understood that managing Trump wasn't about agreeing with the rhetoric. It was about demonstrating.
Welcome back to the deep dive. If you want a masterclass in how to manage the most powerful, and let's be honest, often the most fractious military and political alliance in history, you've definitely come to the right place. Today, we are taking a deep dive into the internal workings of global security, and we're focusing entirely on the new memoir, On My Watch, by Jens Stoltenberg.
That's right. It reflects on his extraordinary decade as NATO Secretary General. So that's 2014 right through to 2024.
A turbulent decade, to say the least.
And this source is just invaluable for understanding modern geopolitics. I mean, it's all about the unique perspective.
It's not just a policy paper.
Exactly. It's not a press summary. It's a rare insider account. It gives you a firsthand look at the private deliberations, the high-stakes decisions that, really define this era.
And what I found interesting is how he blends that high-level strategic analysis with some genuinely personal insights.
He really does. What kept the alliance together, what almost broke it, and at the same time, the personal pressure of leading 30 and then 32 sovereign nations.
Absolutely. So our mission today is to give you the ultimate shortcut to extract the key lessons on alliance management, on high-stakes deterrence, and the kind of, relentless diplomacy it takes.
Diplomacy needed to navigate everything from Russia's annexation of Crimea in 2014 right up to the full-scale invasion of Ukraine.
So we're essentially unpacking a decade where the rules of global security were just constantly being rewritten.
And we're going to focus on the three big challenges that Stoltenberg outlines. First, the perennial difficulty of just maintaining internal unity.
Always a struggle, I imagine.
Then there's the strategic tightrope walk through the war in Ukraine. And finally, the painful legacy of the withdrawal from Afghanistan.
Okay, let's unpack this right away with what sounds like the most fundamental difficulty he faced every single morning, that constant strain on alliance cohesion. I mean, if you step back and look at NATO, you have over 30 countries. They all have vastly different domestic politics, different defense industries, different economic priorities. How did he keep that massive coalition aligned when crises were constantly testing their fundamental unity?
Well, Stoltenberg is remarkably candid about this. He basically describes the cohesion challenge as a perpetual negotiation.
A negotiation, so not an order.
Right. The goal was never enforced uniformity. It was all about managed dissent. He details a specific leadership framework he had to operate under to stop the alliance from splintering.
Especially when, as he notes, a handful of powerful member states, or one very powerful member state, seemed determined to challenge the whole premise of collective defense.
Precisely.
So what was the mechanism then? What's the secret to managing that dissent? We often think of alliances as needing, perfect agreement.
Well, his core philosophy, and this is the massive takeaway for any leader, is that openness, trust, and honest disagreement are the essential elements.
Honest disagreement?
Yes. He wasn't afraid of hard arguments behind closed doors.
Yeah.
In fact, he encouraged them. The key, he argues, was making sure every nation, no matter its size or defense budget, felt their security concerns were genuinely heard.
And taken seriously.
Taken seriously. This meant countless bilateral meetings, setting up private channels of communication, all to diffuse crises before they could hit the public stage and spiral out of control.
That's a powerful insight. It suggests the health of the alliance rests not on avoiding conflict, but on the ability to survive it internally.
Without damaging the core bond of Article 5, the Collective Defense Clause.
So for you, the listener, just consider what it takes to manage a political and military project of that scale, where the stakes are genuinely existential.
It definitely sets the stage for the specific crises. And, no crisis defined the later half of his tenure quite like the war in Ukraine.
Right. The Russian invasion of Ukraine is central to the memoir, obviously. If we connect this back to the bigger picture, what are Stoltenberg's key insights into how the alliance responded?
It was an incredibly delicate moment.
Because NATO was determined to support Ukraine, which is a non-member, without becoming a direct combatant itself.
It was, as you said, a strategic tightrope walk of immense difficulty. And Stoltenberg breaks down the response into three critical interlocking components.
Okay, three.
The first was that intensive behind-the-scenes diplomacy, the immediate work of coordinating a unified sanctions regime, and a political statement.
Which had to bridge the gaps between members with, historically close ties to Russia and those on the front line who were terrified.
Yes, that was the immediate political challenge.
So diplomacy is the lubricant, but what about the hard military action? the aid and the deterrence.
Well, that leads directly to the second and third components. The second was the rapid, almost unprecedented implementation of deterrence strategies.
What does that mean in practice?
He details the specific logistics of shoring up the eastern flank. And this wasn't just symbolic. This was moving troops, equipment, command structures.
From a tripwire strategy to something more substantial.
Exactly. From a small force that exists just to trigger Article 5 to a substantial forward defense posture. And this required convincing members to commit massive resources instantly.
That rapid physical movement of forces. That seems like a huge logistical and political hurdle. What about the third part, the support for Kyiv?
The third, and arguably the most politically complex part, was the challenge of sustaining massive support for Ukraine without escalating the conflict to a direct NATO-Russia war.
The tightrope.
The tightrope. Stoltenberg meticulously details the calculus around military aid. It wasn't just about sending tanks or anti-air systems. It was about these intense internal debates over the risks of certain long-range weapons.
And making sure that aid deliveries maintained alliance unity, even when some nations feared Russian retaliation more than others.
Yes. He had to constantly reinforce the principle that the alliance was supporting Ukrainian sovereignty, not seeking a confrontation with Moscow.
That coordination, ensuring massive support was delivered while maintaining that strategic distance, required an almost superhuman level of internal political alignment.
And the memoir really shows that was hard won. It was a deliberate, calculated effort to manage global perception and military reality at the same time.
Now, if Ukraine was the definitive crisis of the end of his watch, we have to look back at the difficult period that felt like the messy end of an era, the withdrawal from Afghanistan. This presents such a stark contrast to the response in Ukraine, just in terms of alliance commitment and execution.
The Afghanistan withdrawal was a profoundly challenging episode, and he reflects on it with real gravity in the book. Unlike the clear objectives in Ukraine, this was a mission ending.
And he details both the strategic and the moral trade-offs the alliance faced during that rapid exit in 2021.
It does.
So what were those specific trade-offs? Because I think a lot of allies felt blindsided by the speed of the collapse after 2 decades of commitment.
The book emphasizes the complexity of ending a 20-year engagement. I mean, you're talking about training local forces, building infrastructure, establishing democratic structures.
And then leaving.
So the primary trade-off was between the political commitment to an exit timeline, which was largely driven by the U.S., and the moral responsibility to local partners and the security vacuum that the withdrawal inevitably created.
You can feel the difficulty in the writing.
You can. He recounts the difficult decisions around the final logistics, the attempts to coordinate rescue flights, and just the sheer geopolitical reality that the alliance couldn't sustain an indefinite occupation.
And here's where it gets really interesting for me, the contrast between the two crises.
Go on.
In Afghanistan, NATO was responding to an allied political decision to disengage, which led to painful, messy consequences. In Ukraine, NATO was actively and swiftly engaging to defend against external aggression.
It really shows the breadth of the Secretary General's role. He's managing 2 entirely different types of military commitment.
The end of one, the beginning of another.
Yes. The difficult reckoning of ending a mission where success was ambiguous versus mobilizing full-scale political will for collective security against a known aggressor. He had to hold the alliance together through the humiliation of one and the mobilization of the other.
Okay, let's unpack this next crucial element, the role of power and personalities. Because NATO decision-making isn't just driven by abstract military doctrine.
No, not at all.
It's driven by the leaders who sit around that table. How did Stoltenberg handle the major world leaders he worked with, especially those who often seemed outwardly hostile to the alliance structure?
The memoir is quite rich in these personal portraits. It illustrates that human dimension of high-stakes diplomacy. He had to be a master manager of egos and political agendas.
I can only imagine.
He details his working relationships with giants like Angela Merkel, who he paints as this steady anchor during financial crises and a key proponent of continued dialogue with Russia.
And Zelensky.
And then Volodymyr Zelensky, who became this charismatic wartime leader, needing instant, immense military support. And of course, Donald Trump.
The interactions with the former U.S. president have to be the tensest parts of the book, right? Given the public questions he raised about NATO's relevance and burden sharing.
Absolutely. Stoltenberg frames those interactions as intense, direct negotiations about financial commitment. He understood that managing Trump wasn't about agreeing with the rhetoric, It was about demonstrating concrete results.
Showing him the numbers.
Showing him the numbers. He recounts meetings where the threat of the U.S. reducing its commitment felt very real. And Stoltenberg's response, as he details it, was to constantly bring the discussion back to the data, showing the rapid increase in European defense spending under his tenure.
As evidence that allies were, in fact, meeting their burden-sharing obligations.
Exactly. So a huge part of the job was about managing political expectations and diffusing internal tensions driven by domestic politics back home, proving the alliance's value in tangible monetary terms.
It goes back to his philosophy of managing disagreement.
It does. Sometimes you have to meet the challenge head-on with data, rather than just ideology.
So, beyond the internal players, the book also gives this broader strategic context, right? The major external forces. How did he describe managing that uneasy relationship with Russia and the increasing focus on China?
Well, the relationship with Russia was defined by a twin-track approach that lasted right up until 2022.
Twin track.
Maintaining dialogue while simultaneously investing heavily in deterrence. Stoltenberg was committed to communication, even when disagreements were profound. But the message was always clear. NATO would defend every inch of Allied territory.
Difficult balance.
Especially after the 2014 Crimea annexation, where trust was already eroded, but those channels still needed to exist.
And China represents a totally different kind of global power challenge. It's not a traditional territorial threat to the North Atlantic, at least not directly.
That's right. And the memoir dedicates significant space to what was a major strategic shift during his tenure, bringing China into NATO's security calculations.
That's a huge pivot.
It is. He details the discussions about how the alliance views Beijing not just as an economic competitor, but as a systemic challenge.
Involved in things like cyber warfare, intellectual property theft.
Exactly. And rapid technological advancement that impacts global security, even extending into places like the Arctic. The book reinforces the point that modern collective security cannot ignore the global actions of rising powers, even if they operate outside NATO's traditional geographical focus.
Let's shift gears now to the core legacy, Stoltenberg's defense of the alliance's enduring relevance. After facing down this extraordinary decade of challenges, what's his overarching argument for why NATO still matters today?
His argument is multi-layered. He states that NATO still matters deeply, not just militarily, which is undeniable given the war in Ukraine,
Right.
but as a political and moral project for collective security.
So it's more than just tanks and planes.
Much more. It's a defense of the democratic values that underpin the alliance. The political cohesion, he argues, is just as vital as the military hardware, because without those shared democratic ideals, the military cooperation would eventually crumble.
That shifts the focus from purely military capability to the intangible strength of shared principles. And on a personal note, what did he share about navigating that sheer weight of responsibility?
He gives these personal insights into the pressure of command decisions, the late-night phone calls, the gravity of advising leaders on troop deployments.
The responsibility for the safety of billions of people.
Yes. And his reflection expresses a deep hope that future leaders will build constructively on the foundations laid during his tenure, the expansion of the alliance, the renewed commitment to defense spending.
And most importantly,
maintaining that political glue that binds the democratic world together.
this memoir really offers profoundly timely lessons. Alliance management, high-stakes diplomacy, deterrence, all from someone who truly had the best, albeit the most turbulent, seat in the House.
It certainly does. And if Stoltenberg argues that openness, trust, and honest disagreement are essential for cohesion, this raises a really important question for you, the listener, to consider as we look forward. How sustainable is that delicate framework of trust and honest disagreement when you're faced with leaders whose political priorities might fundamentally challenge those core cooperative values?
A very real question.
And what does NATO need to do strategically to ensure that its political resilience actually matches its military might over the next decade?
A perfect, thought-provoking challenge to end on. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the lessons learned from Jens Stoltenberg's decade on my watch.
My pleasure.
We hope these insights inspire you to consider how these lessons of coalition building and crisis navigation apply to every form of international cooperation. Until next time.
Grab On My Watch by Stoltenberg, now on sale $24.95. Don't miss this chance and build good habit and achieve remarkable results. Buy now, today.
Like and subscribe for more Bookhaven podcasts.